You have your Bibles, if you'll turn to Exodus chapter 2 with me this morning. The title of my sermon is What the Church Cannot Survive Without. There is definitely something that if we do not have it, we will fizzle out as a church. And by the way, to the best of my knowledge, we do have this. So that's a good thing. We're not fizzling out, but it's good to have this reminder. You know, a lot of times when you look at the New Testament, and I could say, who's the most popular person in the New Testament? And most people would say, well, other than Jesus. That's kind of a big one. Jesus does seem to take the limelight a lot in the whole Bible because it is his story. But if you go to the New Testament and say, what's a character in the New Testament or a person in the New Testament that everybody's familiar with, and who would be the popular one? Most people would pick the Apostle Paul as the dominating person of the New Testament. I mean, he did write over half of it. That's kind of a big impact. So people would give that to Paul. But when people try to recall who was one of the greatest people in the Old Testament, the name Moses quickly rises to the top. And I don't blame people for picking that name, because if you think about it, his life changed so many things for God's people. If it wasn't for Moses and his involvement in God's story, people are left in captivity and all that stuff, and that doesn't make much of a story. So Moses, his involvement in the Old Testament did change a lot of things. Even during Jesus' time on earth, Moses was highly favored above almost everyone else. Still in the 80 years, we still have Moses as a person where people are saying, oh yeah, we know about Moses. Everybody was familiar with who this guy was. Jesus even gave the people a warning about the Pharisees while referring to Moses' position. So Moses was still a person front and center even when he was long gone and Jesus was on the scene. Look at this verse in Matthew chapter 23 and verse 1. It says, and Jesus spoke to the multitudes and to his disciples, saying, the scribes and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. Therefore, whatever they tell you to observe, that observe and do. But do not do according to their works, for they say and do not do. For they bind heavy burdens hard to bear and lay them on men's shoulders, but they themselves will not move them with one of their fingers. The Pharisees had a problem called religion, and if you've been here for any period of time, you understand the problem with religion. Religion is a bunch of rules and regulations that you are to follow. It means to bind. These are the things you do, these are the things you don't do, and we always try to follow these rules and regulations in religion, and before long we're just overwhelmed by those things. It just wears us down. You have to wear this certain article of clothing, or your hair can only be this long, or there's this certain picture you have to be as a religious person. That is what religion is, a bunch of rules and regulations that you have to follow. The Pharisees were deep into religion. They placed rules and regulations on the people, yet they were so hypocritical that they didn't even follow their own rules and regulations. You know, they placed them on people, but they didn't even follow their own rules. They taught the law of Moses, but then they added to the law of Moses, making it a teaching of shame. You know, they added to it. They even had a Sabbath day journey. You can walk this far, but don't walk even one step farther than this. Otherwise, you've broken our rule. So now people are counting their steps. There was a joke I heard a long time ago that the Pharisees hated Jesus so much that even though he was walking on water, they just want to know, was it over a Sabbath day journey? You know, even though he could walk on water, or are you still following the rules? Are you still worthy? Walking on water, that's a big thing. But they followed all the rules and regulations, and they placed it on you so much that it became a burden to these people. They did teach the law of Moses, and that was good, but they added to the law of Moses. But Jesus still told the people to observe what they were teaching because God's law is good. You can follow what they're teaching, but don't follow their example. Don't follow the Pharisees' example. The Pharisees were those churchgoers who chased people away with all their religious standards. You ever been in a church like that where you walk in and you realize, oh, there's a lot of rules and regulations here. There's a lot of standards. There's a lot of religious obligation. And if you don't do them, then people are kind of looking down on you. You know, and that's what the Pharisees were. They were doing all the religious things, but they were neglecting the people. the one thing they were still doing was holding Moses up on a pedestal. They were still looking at Moses and saying, okay, he's still way up here. There was even a time when a blind man was healed by Jesus, and the Pharisees were interrogating him about who healed him. How did you, we know you were blind, and now you're not blind, and here's the interrogation process. What happened to you? Take a look at their conversation in John chapter 9 and verse 26. It says, then they said to him again, what did he do to you? How did he open your eyes? And he answered them, I told you already, and you did not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you also want to become his disciples? Then they reviled him and said, you are his disciple, but we are Moses' disciple. Moses was the top dog when it came to religious authority. He was the one that brought the law to the people. I mean, if you want to do some name dropping, Moses was the name to drop. When you dropped his name, you won the contest. You know, like, hey, but we're the disciples of Moses. Wow, I guess you can't get any greater than that. You know, that's the top name. So they would say, you're Jesus' disciple, but we are Moses' disciple. We win. We drop the big name, Moses. What the Pharisees didn't realize is what it took for Moses to make it to that honorable position. They didn't realize why he got to the position he got to. They just were honoring the position he held. But they missed what brought him to that position in the first place. It was the same thing the Pharisees were forgetting, and it is also the one thing that the church cannot survive without. That is what they were overlooking. I want to look at one of the most overlooked chapters in Moses' life this morning. This is where all the decisions had to be made in order to become the leader that he became. This one little tiny chapter that we can talk about the Red Sea crossing, and we can talk about the plagues of Egypt, and we can talk about manna coming down from heaven and water coming out of a rock. We can talk about Korah, Dathan, and Abiram, where the ground opens up and swallows them and then shuts them. You know, we're familiar with these stories. But this one story, we don't hear it preached that often. We overlook it. Do you remember that time when that Moses saved those 7 girls? Yeah, that story. It's overlooked. And like, okay, well, what's that about? That's the one I want to talk about this morning. So let's start in Exodus chapter 2 in verse 11. Now it came to pass in those days when Moses was grown that he went out to his brethren and looked at their burdens. And he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his brethren. So he looked this way and that way, and when he saw no one, he killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. Remember, Moses was raised within the walls of Pharaoh's home. His mom put him in the basket. He was found by Pharaoh's daughter. Pharaoh's daughter adopts him. He's raised in Pharaoh's home. And then, only because of God's grace, and God, I find it humorous, the woman is finding somebody to help raise Moses and ends up hiring Moses' mom to do it. That's awesome. So Moses does know that he's a Hebrew because his mom would have taught him that he's a Hebrew. When he sees an Egyptian abusing one of his Hebrew brothers, he took things a little bit too far, and he ends up killing the Egyptian and hiding the Egyptian in sand. The next day is where Moses' life begins to change dramatically. Look at verse 13. And when he went out the second day, behold, 2 Hebrew men were fighting. And he said to the one who did the wrong, why are you striking your companion? Then he said, who made you a prince and a judge over us? Do you intend to kill me as you killed the Egyptian? So Moses feared and said, surely this thing is known. The next day, he noticed 2 Hebrews fighting. Now it's not an Egyptian fighting a Hebrew. Now they're fighting with each other. He sees his own relatives, his own people, fighting with each other. And when he confronted them, they questioned his authority and pointed out that they knew about his guilt. Who do you think you are being in charge of us? They're questioning his authority and say, oh, and by the way, are you going to kill me just like you killed the Egyptian yesterday? We know you're guilty and you're no leader. You're no leader. These guys didn't see Moses as a great leader to be followed. They're not looking at him and go, oh, that's Moses. We should follow him. No, he's not. He doesn't hold that position. He doesn't hold this position that the Pharisees honored so much. They said, who do you think you are trying to lead us? And by the way, we know about what you did yesterday. They questioned if he had any leadership qualities at all. Moses wasn't anyone that people wanted to be like. Nobody's following him. Nobody's looking at Moses and saying, I want to be like him when I grow up. Nobody's looking at him like this. Not only that, but he was a murderer that had just been caught. Then things become worse. Look at verse 15. When Pharaoh heard of this matter, he sought to kill Moses. But Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh and dwelled in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. Moses is now a runaway. His story's just getting better and better. Now he's a runaway. He flees to the land of Midian, and he finds a well to sit on. Believe it or not, this is where Moses' life becomes really, really good. 7 girls show up on the scene and redefine his story altogether. This is the most overlooked chapter in the story of Moses' life. Moses doesn't belong in Midian. Remember, he was born and raised in Egypt. He doesn't belong in Midian. This is a foreign land to him. He doesn't know anyone in the area, but what he does understand is when people are being mistreated. Clearly, he understands that. And this is what captures his attention. Look at verse 16. Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came and drew water, and they filled the troughs to water their father's flock. And the shepherds came and drove them away, but Moses stood up and helped them and watered their flock. These 7 young ladies came to get water for their animals, just as they did on a regular basis. On this day, a bunch of shepherds come in and chase them away. You've got a bunch of bullies coming in and picking on these 7 girls. They chase these girls away. Moses finds himself intervening, just as he did for his brother in Egypt, when he ended up killing the Egyptian. He saw somebody being mistreated, and he couldn't help it. He had to intervene. That's what he's doing right here. Now, don't miss this, because this is God is showing us a connection here between each one of these stories. So don't miss what's going on here. Once Moses helps these girls get the water they need, they head back home. They just head back home. This is where Moses catches the attention of their father. Look at verse 18. When they came to Reuel, their father, he said, "How is it that you have come so soon today?" And they said, "An Egyptian delivered us from the hand of the shepherds, and he also drew enough water for us and watered the flock." If you want to get to the heart of a father quickly, intervene for the safety of his children. That'll do it. You have now come, you've hit the heart of the father. You did something to protect my kids? Yeah, I want to meet you. I want to talk to you. You got right to my heart there. You protected my kids. When Reuel's daughters come home so soon, he wants to know what made the difference. Why are you here so early today? It usually takes a while to get water, and today you're back a lot sooner. What happened? Once he finds out that there's a hero behind the scenes, he has to meet him. Who is this guy? Who is this guy that chased the shepherds off and protected my girls? Who is he? It wasn't enough that he helped his daughters. There had to be some way to show his appreciation. Who is this guy? Look at verse 20. So he said to his daughters, "And where is he? Why is it that you have left the man? Call him that he may eat bread." The first thing Reuel wants to know is, how could you let a guy like that get away? He saved you. He protected you. Where is he now? How did you let a guy like that get away? Go get him back. Go get him back. Offer him dinner or something. That'll get a man's attention. Go ahead and offer him food. Tell him to come eat bread with us. But get him here. I want to meet this guy. I want to see this guy that protected my daughters. And the girls did exactly that. Through all of this, Moses finds a new home. All of what he's going through. Remember, he grows up in Egypt. He ends up killing an Egyptian. He ends up running away from Egypt. Now he's a stranger in a foreign land. He's just sitting down by a well, and 7 girls come up to get water. They're getting picked on. He chases the shepherds away, and now that action right there, one thing leads to another, and Moses finally has a new home. He didn't fit in with the Hebrew people, and he wouldn't dare go back to the Egyptians after what he's done. This was now everything he could ask for. Look at verse 21. Then Moses was content to live with the man And he gave Zipporah his daughter to Moses, and she bore him a son. He called his name Gershom, for he said, I have been a stranger in a foreign land. Moses has a family now. A lot of times we miss this little detail in the story of Moses. We see him as the one who led the captives free. We see him with the Red Sea crossing, the one that is in the manna from heaven story, the water from the rock, leading people up to the promised land. We see all those things, but do you remember that time when he had a little family of his own and he was a shepherd and all that? We overlooked this one little story here. He has a family now. He has a wife and a son, and his father-in-law loves and respects him. This is a good place. Life has become good for Moses. There's no reason that Moses would ever want to leave this. Why would Moses ever walk away from this? You have love, you have respect, you have a family that's going to take care of you, you have a family who wants you. You are valued. You have a wife and a son. Why would you ever want to leave? And then God steps in and ties all those loose ends together for Moses. Why would you leave, Moses? God knows exactly why Moses would leave. The reason why Moses had to leave Egypt was because he loves people. That's why he had to leave Egypt. He couldn't help but defend his brother's life by taking on the Egyptian. You don't mistreat people. I'm going to intervene. I'm going to help him because there's a person in need. I'm going to help him. That's why he had to leave Egypt. The reason he was honored by his father-in-law was because Moses loved people. When he saw those 7 girls being mistreated, he had to do something. He had to intervene. He couldn't just turn his back when he saw a need. He had to get involved. That's why Moses is where he's at. There was something about people that Moses just had to take care of. You just don't leave somebody in a situation where they need help. You do something. You help. That's why Moses got to where he's at. And when God saw this about him, he only had one request to make. And you can see God's sense of humor in this. You can see how God knows us better than we know ourselves. You can see how God makes all of this connect together. Moses was tending to his father-in-law's flock in the back side of the desert. The very next chapter it says he's tending to his father-in-law's flock in the back side of a desert when God speaks to him through a burning bush. Bush, it's a non-burning bush because it's burning but it's not being consumed. So make that make sense in your head. It's a non-burning bush. It's a butane bush. It's not burning. It's just burning. Make it make sense somehow. Moses sees this bush. God is talking to Moses from a burning bush. All Moses is doing is taking care of sheep. He's just taking care of his father-in-law's sheep. And God introduces himself to Moses, and then he speaks right to Moses' heart. Check out this approach. God knows us so well. Check out this approach. This is why Moses was going to make such a good leader, and God knew this. Look at when God says to him in Exodus chapter 3 and verse 7. And the Lord said, I have surely seen the oppression of my people who are in Egypt, and have heard their cry because of their taskmasters, for I know their sorrows. Moses may not know he's all in yet, but God knows Moses is all in. That was a good approach. Hey, Moses, I just got to tell you one thing. What's that? People are suffering. They're being abused. They're being hurt. They're caught in slavery. Moses was a man who cared deeply about people. God says people are being oppressed. I've heard their cries. I've heard their cries, Moses. God isn't trying to manipulate Moses here. He's speaking right to Moses' heart. Hey, there's people. There's a lot of people in need. A lot of people in need. Moses, there are millions of people stuck in slavery, and they're going to die that way if somebody doesn't care about them. Are you in? Are you in? And as we know, Moses doesn't really feel adequate for the job, but he chooses to trust God and do it anyway. We know that part of the story. Moses is like, oh man, God, can you find somebody else? Can we do it any other way? Nope, you're the guy. I have a speech impediment. I don't speak that well. Can we fix that? Yeah. Your brother can go with you. Hang on. Is there anything else we can do? Like, no, but we can do it. I'll go with you. I'll go with you and we'll do it together. But they're going to remain that way if somebody doesn't intervene, Moses. What do you want to do? I'm in. I'm in. You know you have a wife and a kid and a father-in-law who loves you. You got a family here. You could just die happy right there. But there are people who need help. I'm in. Now, let's go do it. It's millions of people. Who's picking on them? The entire nation of Egypt. How big of a team do we have? Me and you. Let's do this. And Moses says, okay, let's go. Let's do this. Let's do this. I'm in. I'm in. We got to do something. He couldn't just pretend that there weren't people in need. Moses couldn't shut that off. Like, they need help. I've got to do something here. This is what put Moses in such an honorable position among the Jewish people. This is what brings him to the position of authority and honor. This is also the attribute that the Pharisees were missing. And this is the heart that the church cannot survive without. There must be a love for people. You've got to love people. We will fizzle out if we do not have that heart right there. There are people in need. And somebody's got to step in. Somebody's got to fill the gap. There are people in need. Moses became one of the greatest leaders Israel ever had. And it wasn't because of his speaking ability. It wasn't because of his popularity. That's not what got him to that position. It was because no matter how often he was rejected or mistreated by others, he still loved people. Remember later on, the Israelites try to kill him several times. They want him dead. They want him out. And what does Moses do? He intervenes on behalf of those people to God. There's even a time when God says, I'm just going to wipe them all out. And Moses says, wait, let's not do that. Let's not get rid of the people. And God says, okay, all right, we'll keep going, Moses. We'll keep going. Because Moses loved the people. Even though the people hated Moses at that time, he said, they're still in need. They're whiny people, but they're people. Yeah, they complain a lot. They win the lottery, they complain that they have to pay the taxes. They're not happy people, but they're real people. They're real people. And God, let's just not wipe them out. Let's keep going. Let's keep going. And God says, that's what I'm looking for. That's what I'm looking for. That's what makes the leader that God was looking for. Centuries later, the Pharisees were still lifting Moses up on a pedestal, as we saw a little bit earlier. But they were missing everything that made him such a great man. They were missing that part of things. Look at the one of the conversations that Jesus had with the Pharisees. Matthew 23, verse 23. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you pay tithe of mint and anise and cumin, and have neglected the weightier matters of the law, justice and mercy and faith. These you ought to have done without leaving the others undone. They were so focused on keeping the law of Moses that they were neglecting people. They were neglecting people. They were so focused on keeping all the rules that they failed to show justice and mercy and faith. Yeah, where's the character of God in all that you're doing, Pharisees? Yeah, you're keeping the law. Man, you're tithing your mint. Man, you're making sure you've got all the rules in line. But what about showing God's character to the people? What about the people? What about the people? People received more obligations from the Pharisees. They were not receiving mercy or compassion. They didn't get that. They got judgment and shame, but they didn't get mercy and compassion. The reason that Jesus clashed so much with the Pharisees was due to the fact that he handled people with love rather than demands. I'm not going to put a burden on you. How about this? Why don't you take my yoke upon you? Because it's light. The Pharisees' yoke, you put that on you, it's going to weigh you down. How about mine? How about mine? Because there's coming a point when I'm going to tell you the really exciting piece of news. You know, all that work trying to make sure you're in good standing with God and making sure God's pleased with your sacrifices and all that, there's one day I'm going to announce, it is finished. And I am the Lord of the Sabbath. And you can finally rest. Let's just rest. That's a good burden. Why don't you take my burden? It's light. It's light. It's a relationship. Not a religion. It's a relationship. Why don't you take that? That is why Jesus clashed with the Pharisees. The Pharisees, all the people have to do this and that and the other thing. And Jesus says, how about I just do it all? I fulfill the whole law on myself, and then we just have a relationship. That sounds like a good thing. Pharisees didn't go for that. The reason that Jesus clashed with them is because he loved people. Pharisees weren't about the people. Look at Matthew chapter 9 and verse 36. But when he saw the multitudes, he was moved with compassion for them, because they were weary and scattered like sheep having no shepherd. And then he said to his disciples, the harvest truly is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore pray the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest. Jesus shared Moses' desire to reach people. It's about the people. They're like sheep without a shepherd. They're ready. We've got to have more people reaching more people. Pray that God sends more people to reach more people. His heart was moved with compassion when he saw the needs of the people. They needed love. They needed a Savior. When God told Moses about the needs of his people, Moses wasn't going to be able to convince himself to stand idle. Hey, Moses, we have a need. Well, what's the matter? People are suffering. They're going to die in slavery. They need somebody to intervene. And God knew Moses wasn't just going to be able to shut that off, because people still have needs. He had to get involved. The people were trapped in slavery, and they needed to know that God had provided a way out. When Jesus saw the needs of the people, he couldn't just stand idle either. He came down to earth and he got involved. That's what God did. He came down to earth and he got involved. When we were trapped in our as slaves to sin, that's what we were. We were trapped in we were trapped as slaves in sin. And we needed to know that God provided a way out. So Jesus steps in and says, okay, I can't just let him go. I can't just let him go. Because Moses had this kind of heart, he was able to lead so many people out of slavery and into a life of freedom. And because Jesus had this same kind of heart, he did the same thing. He did the same thing. Here's where everything hits home. You know, like, okay, that's good about Jesus and that's good about Moses. Now let's bring it all to us. Let's go ahead and let it hit home. If the church does not share the same kind of love for people, it will not survive. We have got to have this same heart. We've got to have this same kind of burden for people. We can go over here and we can fix up our new building until it's the talk of the town. We can make that thing shine. We can put the car dealership lights. Yeah, we can do all that. See, we can make that. We can bring the attention of St. Joseph to that building. We can make that thing sparkle and shine. We can give away free stuff until people are tired of receiving free stuff. Do you know how much free stuff that would be? Because people love to receive free stuff. We can give out free stuff all we want until people are like, please, no more stuff. No more stuff. But if we do not have a craving to reach people for the cause of Christ, we will eventually die off ourselves. We will eventually just fizzle out. Because the church has to have this kind of heart. Let's take a look at the heart that we're supposed to be reflecting in our own lives. 2 Peter chapter 3 and verse 9. The Lord is not slack concerning his promise, as some count slackness, but is long-suffering toward us, not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. When God chose people throughout the Bible, this is what God chose them for. This right here. He chose people for the purpose of saving the multitudes. Every story in the Bible, you'll see how God chose somebody. Why did God choose that person? It was all leading to the salvation of people. Always. pointing to Jesus Christ, the one who came to seek and save the lost. It all points to Jesus Christ, all the way through the Bible. When Adam and Eve sinned in the Garden of Eden, God immediately protected them and gave them a promise. I'm going to save you. I'm going to save you. Yeah, but we're in the wrong. We deserve to die. No, I'm still not willing that any should perish. I don't want to lose you. Even though you hurt me, I still love you. And every day they woke up, they were still loved by that same God. No matter what they were doing in their life, God still loved them. When the world became so wicked that it had to be destroyed, God prepared an ark for all who would to be spared. Because he still didn't want to lose them. I'm going to have to destroy everything, but there's a way out. I'm offering salvation. There's a way out because I still don't want to lose you. You still have a need, and I still want to intervene. So I'm giving you a way out. And when we had no way to get to heaven on our own, Jesus took our brutal punishment and made a way for us to be saved. There's still people in need. There's still people in need. God has been chasing after people since day one. That's the heart of God. That's what's supposed to be the heart of the church. This is the heart that God wants us to have. All of this is the heart God wants us to have. Moses could have just stayed in Midian with his new wife and his son. He could have done that. He finally had people who loved him and wanted him. Nobody was rejecting him there. Nobody was looking down on him. He had a good life. He was established. Die happy. Raise your grandchildren. Just let them come over and play at your house. Turn on the game at your house. Make your place the place of Christmas and Thanksgiving. Moses just lived it up. Enjoy life. But he couldn't get over the needs of the people. There were still people in slavery. He said, I can't get my mind to shut off. There's still people who are in need. In the New Testament, we have another name where people hold up to be a man to be followed, and Paul the Apostle. Paul the Apostle. Let's look at his heart. 1 Corinthians chapter 9 and verse 19. For though I am free from all men, I have made myself a servant to all, that I might win the more. Paul was another man who could have just dropped everything and enjoyed his life. Yeah, you're popular. People love you, Paul. You don't have to follow Jesus Christ and dedicate your whole life all the way to the point where they cut your head off. You don't have to go that far, Paul. But Paul says, I can't shake this. I can't shake it. His love for God and people wouldn't allow him to stand still. I have to keep going. Paul fought to his last breath to reach people with the message of God's grace. This is the reason it got all the way to you and me. Because there were people like that said there are people in need now, and there are people yet to come who still have this need. And I have to live my life out, sold out to God. Because even if I might never meet those people in the future, I still have to get the message to them because there's still people in need. This is the heart that the church cannot survive without. We have to have this heart. We have to connect with people. We live in a world that is still enslaved by sin. But many of them don't even realize that this is the problem. They're not thinking that. They're not thinking of this sin problem. They're just thinking life is awful. Life is hard. I can't make ends meet. I don't know why there's so much suffering. I don't know what's going on. We cannot allow ourselves to get so distracted by the things that we have or the things that we can do that we neglect how important it is to reach another soul for Christ. We have to reach people. Stay faithful. Stay faithful. Reflect the character of Christ to those around you at all times. And yes, sometimes it is impossible to talk to somebody about Christ. Sometimes they just don't want to hear it. I've been there many times. Sometimes it is impossible to talk to somebody about Christ, but it is always possible to show Christ. All the time. You can show Christ through your life 100% of the time. That's possible. You might not be able to talk about him, but you can show his character through your life. You can let him work through you. Just as Moses could have stayed with his wife and his son, we still have that same option ourselves. We can do nothing, or we can get involved, or we can try something. Moses felt inadequate, when God asked him to go. We know that story. Like, no, not me. Not me. He felt inadequate. And you may feel inadequate too. Man, I can't talk to people. Can you let the love of God show through your life for people? When you see somebody in need, can you be kind? Can you be loving? Then you can just say, hey, if you don't go to church anywhere, you can come check out ours. Come on. We'll give you a donut and coffee for nothing. We'll give you 2 donuts and 2 cups of coffee for nothing. And if you drink the whole pot, we'll make another one. We just want to love you. We just want to love you. Come on over. Come on over. And then we let the Word of God reach their heart and change their life. If we as a church do not have a burden for souls, then we as a church will not survive. We've got to care about people. Now, are people going to treat you good all the time? No. Actually, the percentage is usually low of the way people treat us good. People are usually looking out for themselves. But there's a lot of good people out there doing a lot of kind things. But kind things, good deeds don't get you to heaven. Good works don't get you to heaven. There's only one way to heaven, and that's Jesus Christ. That's it. Why don't we go out there and let the character of God shine through our lives so people can see God in our lives? That'll spark a conversation with people. And when you start that conversation, or when they start that conversation with you, you can then tie in God. What makes you so different? Why do you love people? Why did that person treat you bad and you still treated them good? Why did you do that? Because of the grace of God in my life, what Jesus Christ did for me, I can't help but do that for others either. But what if they weren't worthy? Neither was I. Neither was I. And God did it for me. So I'm going to do it for them. We cannot lose the heart for people. If we lose the heart for people, then all we have is a building. All we have is a bunch of programs. All we're doing is passing out literature. All we're doing is having a Christian social club. That is not a church. That is not a church. A church, God never told the world to come to church. Never once. Look through the whole Bible. Never once did God say for the world to come to church. But over and over and over again, he told the church to go to the world. We cannot lose our love for people. We have to love people.